Hello, this is Unsung with GameLeap, and in today's video, we're going to be going over the tentative patch 13.19 changes. This is the full list in theory. Sometimes Riot likes to add or remove certain champions. Ziggs was slated to get a buff. He's clearly not on this list. Azir was not supposed to get a nerf. Azir is now being nerfed. You get the idea. There are some things that might change in the next week, but this is generally going to be the locked-in patch. Let's go ahead and look over the buffs and then the nerfs afterwards. First and foremost, Galio is receiving a buff to his ulti cooldown. This is actually a pretty nice change. Galio has decent matchups into most of the meta mids right now. If you've played solo queue at all in like the last month, there's been a big resurgence in Orianna. Syndra is seeing some play. AP mages are doing pretty well when you're not against an AD assassin. Galio is a cool pick for when this happens. This buff primarily lets him free on the map instead of just a straight buff to his lane phase. This means that we can go for risky plays on the other side of the map and then get back to help our team with Baron. You get the idea. This is just a team fighting buff for Galio. This makes him a little bit more useful in the side lane without over buffing him in the lane phase. If you want to play Galio as a counter into some of these meta mids, I would highly recommend that this is a patch that you actually pick him up, because I doubt he's going to receive any other significant changes or nerfs based off of this buff. Next up on our list is Gangplank. The ulti cooldown has been reduced from 180 to 140 to 170 to 130. Death's Daughter's slow has also been increased to 75% for 1 second, up from 60, and Raise Morale's movement speed has also been increased by 10%. This is a nice set of changes for Gangplank's ultimate. Gangplank is a champion that, in my opinion, does not need buffs. GP for One Tricks has been one of the highest win rate champions in all of League. This champion has an incredibly high mastery curve, which means that the more you play GP, the more effective that GP is going to be overall. GP is in a relatively balanced spot right now. He might be just a tad on the weaker end, but this is okay. Gangplank is kind of toxic to play against. It's really unfun to lane against him, but this is kind of like the least overpowered way that they could buff him. Like Galio, he has a little bit more pressure on the map due to the reduced ulti cooldown, and also the increased slow allows him to set up more picks. Overall, this is a decent GP buff. I'm not sure if he actually needs this work personally. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you ever want to learn a champion like GP, I would highly recommend that you go over to GameLeap.com by clicking on the description box below to check out our champion courses. I have spent hundreds of hours making perfect courses for champions such as Gangplank. Go ahead, check them out, visit the website. Next on our list is Jhin. Jhin has received a R damage buff. He has received 14 damage on rank 1 and 44 damage at rank 3. This is kind of a deceptively strong buff. Based on missing HP, Jhin's ulti does more damage, and this is up to 4 times increased, right? Riot likes to keep with the themes. Basically, this means that Jhin will have a lot easier of a time blowing people up as he initiates or sniping them when they're already super low. Because the missing HP ratio is so high on this and the base damage has gone up so significantly, our 4th shot in our ultimate is really going to clap people, even the tankiest of foes. I think that this is a really positive change. If you like playing Jhin and you want to play Jhin, definitely wait for this patch. I don't think he's going to be pick or ban. Crit ADCs as a whole are kind of bad right now, and the champion nerfs and stuff don't really change that. So overall, I think that Jhin will be in a pretty nice spot. If you like playing Jhin, you really need to play him next patch. Next up, we have some kind of questionable changes to Lee Sin. For context, Riot has said that they are going to ship a lane nerf for Lee Sin, but just based off of what's on the change list here, Lee Sin is getting extra armor, which is nice for his jungle clear. He gets kind of low compared to most other junglers, but the big thing is that he's getting a free Vamp Scepter from his W at rank 1 instead of it only being 5%. This looks nightmarish for Lane Lee Sin. Lane Lee Sin has only gone away because his wave clear kind of got nerfed a little bit, and they also did hit his Omni Vamp on the W. This, without any lane nerfs, looks incredibly overpowered again. Lee Sin counters Renekton. He does really well into Aatrox. He has good matchups into Malphite. Lee kind of does it all. So this change looks like it might push Lane Lee kind of over the edge. It might not if Riot ships the appropriate lane nerf, but if you like playing Lee Sin in the jungle, this is definitely the patch that you should play him. Next up, there are some buffs to Lissandra. They're buffing the root duration on her W. Lissandra is already meta. She is one of the best counter picks in the game. She's situationally incredibly overpowered. This buff is purely just a pro play change. If you play Zed or any sort of AD assassin, ban Lissandra next patch for sure. Do not let this champion get through. If you are a Lissandra player, then I pray for you that your champion does not get over banned, because this is kind of a weird change. Definitely a pro skewed buff. No idea what this is shipping. Nunu is receiving a buff to his AP ratios. Nunu has one of the highest AP rotations in all of League. His Q has a decent scaling, the W has a really high scaling, the E, as you can see, has a 90% scaling if we hit all of our snowballs, and now it's going up to 135%. This, when paired with Nunu's 300% AP scaling on his ulti, is quite scary. We might see some off-tank Nunu builds. With this change, it might be a little bit more common to go like demonic on Nunu and then scale into a Sunfire tank, but I doubt that's the direction it'll take. To me, this looks like a buff to Kesha. This is purely an AP Nunu buff, and this is okay. AP Nunu is a lot less frustrating to play against than Tank Nunu. We can actually kill AP Nunu. He can bleed. So this sort of buff is odd, especially so late into the season. I doubt that Nunu will skyrocket in pick rate or be picked in Worlds with these changes. And in your solo queue games, I still don't think that he's going to be nearly as overpowered as something like Bel'Veth or Nocturne or Jarvan even. Overall, if you're a Nunu player, this is a decent buff. It seems kind of unnecessary to me. Pyke is receiving a health growth change. This is really nice because Pyke is super squishy, especially in the current state of the game. His W cooldown has also gone down 2 seconds per rank. Basically, every time that we put a point in our W on Pyke, the cooldown goes down a little bit more now. This is an interesting change. Basically, when Pyke released, you would max his W second because it just gave you a huge amount of movement speed. Riot has since nerfed that into the ground, and now it's only giving you cooldown back if we max his second. I don't think that this is worth maxing second still, because the E cooldown and the damage that you get is simply more important than our W cooldown. The W cooldown is an interesting way to buff him because Pyke's W is probably the most frustrating thing to play against on the champion. It's what makes him so slippery and hard to pin down. So this is an interesting change. The bigger buff here is definitely going to be the health growth change. This means that we won't actually get 100 to Ode as easily in the mid to late game as he currently does, which is a good change. Pyke is currently one of, if not the strongest level 1 support in the game. There's not many other champions that can trade with Halo Blade's Ignite Cheap Shot Pyke, so this is nice that he's going to be playable outside of the lane phase. Syndra is receiving a buff to her Q's base damage. This is a pro buff, straight up. Syndra is good in solo queue. She's always been good in solo queue since her rework, and she's very hard to punish with the current meta. A lot of the current meta mid laners go even with Syndra, which is kind of an auto loss because of the way that her scaling works, right? This buff is not meant for solo queue. This is a buff purely for pro play. I would recommend that you abuse this champion this patch because Riot has definitely overstepped here. Syndra is really strong. She's really good in the hands of a skilled player. If you understand how to lead your skill shots and how to get all of your splinters very quickly, then this is just going to be a straight up buff for your champion. If you've ever wanted to learn Syndra, now is a patch to do it. This buff will probably get reverted very soon. Twitch has received an R missile speed increased. Now his R is 1,000 units faster. This is really nice. This is going to prevent people from walking out of the tip range of your ulti. It'll prevent people from walking out of it sideways when they have Ghost on and make Twitch a little bit more consistent. Twitch has consistently been one of the higher win rate ADCs. He doesn't really opt in to crit as hard as most other AD carries. He gets the build Blade of the Ruin King. If he does go crit, then he goes Kraken Slayer, which is the only good crit item left at this point. So this is a nice buff to Twitch. This isn't going to change him or break him in any significant ways. It's just making him a little bit more consistent. We might get an extra auto here and there, but this isn't going to solve the issues that crit ADCs have. If you're a Twitch main, this is a great buff for you. It means that Twitch is going to be less likely to miss, which is, you know, one of the most frustrating parts of his kit. This is a really good change and it should have happened a long time ago in my opinion. Now, next up, Azir has been nerfed. This is a nerf for pro play. People in solo queue don't get as much out of Azir as pro players do. The reason for this is that Azir is one of the strongest bullies in the game when played correctly, but you need to have perfect spacing. If you want to play Azir in solo queue, stay away from this champion, straight up. Azir is one of the lower win rate mids unless you're really high elo. The reason for this is that his spacing is super important. His lane phase is basically the only stage of the game that you can mess up on this champion. His late game and his out of lane are really easy to play. So them doubling down on this weakness will definitely drop Azir into that like 44% win rate territory where he's going to be kind of unplayable. Unless you are aspiring to learn Azir, I would definitely recommend staying away from this champion. This is just a nerf for pro play, and unfortunately those of you that play solo queue and love the champion are just going to have to suffer this patch. Rek'Sai is getting another readjustment. Whoever would have guessed the highest win rate jungler since her rework is getting nerfed again. This champion has been nerfed like 4 or 5 times at this point. I have lost track, to be honest, and this is not going to fix her issues. She's too consistent, she has too much movement speed, her burst is too high. There's too many problems with this champ right now. They're nerfing her passive healing. The passive healing nerf is not super significant. It makes her a little bit less tanky, I guess, in skirmishes. Rek'Sai is oppressive because she kills you 100 to 0 when she ganks your lane. They're nerfing the Q's damage by 4% in the early game. Okay, that would be nice if she didn't already overkill you as soon as she got her bite off, or, you know, like chase you down with Stride Breaker, and then when she hits 6, if she didn't overkill you as well. The Burrowed movement speed nerf is the most significant nerf here. This is going to prevent Rek'Sai from running you down until she completes Stride Breaker, in which case she's just as fast as before. The flat movement speed here doesn't matter as much because we hit a point on these champions with the amount of percentage movement speed that we get where we're hitting a soft cap anyways, right? So instead of losing like a more significant amount of movement speed, we're losing a kind of a small amount, right? Rek'Sai is still going to be able to chase you down. She still has access to smite to speed herself up and slow you down, this doesn't really solve her issues. The unburrow damage on Rek'Sai is being increased to compensate. They're trying to force her more into a bruiser role, and they constantly want her unburrowing. The problem is that Rek'Sai's ulti is almost a guaranteed kill unless you get Zanya's. I don't think that this nerf is going to be significant. It might knock her down to like the number 2 highest win rate jungler, but this champion's very broken. You need to be playing it as often as you can. If she's hard for you to learn, then go to the website and check out our courses. Renekton is receiving a magic resist nerf by 4. Renekton is currently like the safest blind pick top laner in the game. He doesn't really have any bad matchups. Rumble is like one of his worst matchups, but that's like the only bad matchup that he has off the top of my head. This just basically means that Rumble has a little bit of a better matchup into Renekton, but they're trying to like keep Renekton out of mid lane is what I'd assume is the goal here. Renekton in mid lane has historically been one of the better Stonewall picks for pro play. This isn't really a change for solo queue, and it won't really change him in solo queue. He's still going to be a S tier blind pickable top laner, just simply due to how overpowered Gore Drinker and Spear of Shojin are. If you want to play Renekton, don't let this nerf scare you. This is like nothing, to be honest. Keep playing Renekton, maybe ban Rumble is the only suggestion here. Zeri has received a base movement speed nerf. This is a pro play change. Zeri is not very strong in solo queue under Masters. It's very clear as to why. She's hard to play. It's a champion that is reliant on getting good auto spacing and having perfect skill shot management. This is just like another Azir nerf for you guys. Riot cannot balance Zeri in an appropriate manner for professional play, so they're doing these ham-fisted kind of changes that are just blanket nerfs to everybody instead of, you know, solving the issue. What would be a good nerf to Zeri would be changing her range and maybe making her a little bit less on the mixed damage side. She maybe should not zap 20% of your HP with her passive, but, you know, in basically every situation where Zeri can be abused by a pro player, she is currently being abused, and it's obvious as to why. She's one of the only decent crit ADCs. She has a longer range than normal, and she gets lethal tempo on top of that. It's the only thing that's like keeping her over the edge. The movement speed nerf is going to suck for sure for those of you that like playing Zeri in solo queue. It's going to be really impactful, especially on an AD carry, to receive a sort of movement speed nerf like this. So unfortunately, you Zeri players out there are just going to have to rub some dirt on it and deal with it until preseason happens, and maybe they can rebalance the game in the appropriate way. Randuin's Omen is receiving a buff. They're reducing the price by 300 gold. This is nice. Randuin's is kind of an awkward item to buy. Frozen Heart is usually better than Randuin's is overall. The amount of HP that Randuin's gives and the amount of armor isn't like super significant. It's usually better to get a full HP item and then a full armor item. They're trying to make Randuin's more of a cheaper item to counter some of the AD champions that are running amok right now. I'd assume the Assassins. This doesn't really make Randuin's super effective, as crit ADCs aren't really in the meta right now. Mostly it's like on hit and like mixed damage profiles, which is affected by this a lot less. The mixed damage that we get comes from items, and it comes from like static shiv and stuff like that. You know, Nashers in the case of Kai'Sa. This doesn't really change anything with the item. If we want armor, then it's usually better to just go Frozen Heart, especially if we're like a bruiser or some sort of tanky champion that builds a lot of health. It's a nice buff to the item, but I don't think it'll make it be bought a significant amount more. Seeker's Armguard is also receiving a base armor and max armor change. This is really nice if you hate playing against Zed. This basically means that Seeker's Armguard might not be troll to buy. If we're against a Kiana or a Talon or a Zed, then we can get this item in a few more games and it won't gimp us completely in the early game. What sucks about Seekers right now is it feels awkward to complete because Lost Chapter is so cheap, and Lost Chapter is what prevents us from having mana issues. In the current iteration of the game, Assassins are very weak when you understand how to play against them the correct way. This means that we can make a mistake here or there if we have Seekers now. Before, if you made a mistake, Assassin snowballed super hard. I think that this is a positive change. There's a lot more lethality in the game, and Assassins are dipping into Axiom Arc a little bit more. So this is a good change for solo queue. This is important for those of you that don't like playing against Zed. If you've had a lot of trouble against Talon lately, if Kiana is appearing in your games, then I would definitely recommend that if you're a mage player, that you open up your build pathing a little bit and don't be afraid to opt into an early Seekers as much as before. This won't harm you nearly as much, and it's not as awkward to buy this item as it is to complete like a Lost Chapter, for example, because we won't be losing out as much, right? Anyways, this was Unsung with Gamely. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.